Hello everybody and welcome to the Rolex 24 at Daytona, the season opener for the IMSA WeatherTech Championship. Walking onto the grid, 3 times a Rolex winner, Christian Fittipaldi. And 7 times NASCAR Cup champion, Jimmy Johnson.
It's really a pretty big process to go through between Daytona and Sebring for us.
Everyone I talk to, they say, well, what do you do between races? Do you have another job? Well, no, you spend all that time, go through and look at everything.
First of all, everything gets packed up and has its place in the trailer and everything gets put away, and it's pretty easy, there's an order as to what goes in, but the actual loading process is pretty straightforward nowadays. All the support equipment, the tent, toolboxes, awnings, pit equipment, the car goes in usually last, and door closes and truck heads home.
I think it is that people don't get is really how much work goes in from as soon as the trailer gets back into the shop until it leaves the shop. And it's constant. Every single wire to every single brake line, clutch lines, air lines, the air jacks. Besides dismantling the car 100%, we dismantle about 60 to 75% after every race weekend. The only thing we don't take out is the fuel cell, basically, and the wiring harness. But we still inspect the wiring harness.
A typical schedule when we get back to the shop is the car comes out of the trailer and gets put on the setup pad here in the shop, and we do a set down. So we know how the car came off the track. If we've had some damage or some bumps and bruises during the course of the race, we'll see, did that, affect the setup or alignment of the car at all. If so, that gets noted, but everything goes into a database so we know where it started the race, where it ended the race.
But just a mountain of data that comes off this car over 24 hours of racing, so there's plenty to be done there to look over it and see what we can learn from that and what we can take forward into the rest of the season here.
car is only fully assembled in the shop for maybe an hour between each race.
All the body work goes off to another area and gets checked over for cracks or any missing hardware. One of us will start going through the gearbox, either Aaron or myself. And then the other one will pull the engine, and whether we're changing the engine or not, we still always pull it and clean around it and make sure there's nothing going on up front. And then you have to go through the suspension. All the sphericals in the suspension get worn out, so you're replacing those constantly. You're rebuilding the uprights. We don't run very much grease in the uprights, so they run as free as they can, but that also means you have to maintain them a lot more than you would just a street car or something like that. Brakes are probably one of the most important things on the car. Not only are they one of the most expensive things on the car, but you need them to last. We take them apart and we machine them to make them flat again, basically like if you took your steel rotors off your street car to AutoZone or wherever you take them to, and they true up the rotors to make them flat again. We do that constantly.
Oh, I think a lot of people just think it's like a street car where you change the oil twice a year or something, and other than that, just make sure all the bodywork's on it. But there's a whole lot more that goes into one of these DPIs than that. I mean, you basically strip the car down to the tub where the driver sits, and everything outside of that gets checked over and rebuilt. So it's really a pretty big process.
Hundreds of man hours go into that. It depends on where you've come from. If you come from a 24-hour race in Daytona, then it's maybe 300 or 400 man hours. If it's come from a short race, and maybe it's 200 or 300 hours. As a Cadillac team, we'll get the BOP from Cadillac after they've had their manufacturers meetings with IMSA. They'll receive the BOP. They pass it on to us.
The balance of performance is basically all they do is try to equal all the competitors out as much as possible. So the playing field is as even as they can make it. So it kind of transfers over to the drivers the drivers and teams themselves have to win or lose races.
Typically what we're looking at, or waiting on any, final assembly is what our fuel capacity is going to be for each weekend, the weight, and engine air restrictor. Wing angles and things like that, minimums and maximums, change from one track to the next, but that's a kind of a last part of a setup anyway, so that's pretty easy to sort out. But you're really just waiting to close up the fuel cell till you know for sure what the fuel capacity is going to be.
They do the BOP normally the Wednesday the week prior to race week. It doesn't matter if it's 2 weeks between races or 6 months. It's the Wednesday before. So you're always waiting. What makes it a pain is there's a lot of things you can't do. You can't finish putting the car together until you get those BOP tables.
The actual loading process is pretty straightforward nowadays. It only takes an hour or less to load the trailer because everything has its place and it goes in the exact same place each time, and put it in, click it in, and move on to the next thing.
Basically, you're taking this 25,000 square foot workspace that we've got here and trying to condense it into one semi-trailer, and then spread it out over whatever you can fit under an awning at the racetrack. So everything from toolboxes, not just your basic wrenches and sockets, but you've got all sorts of specialty tools. You've got all the laptops and all the specialized cables and software and everything that you need to talk to the car, and it's really just trying to take everything that you need to work on the car back at the shop and figure out what of that you can condense and bring along with you so you have the best workspace possible. And on the car side of it, we bring enough parts to the track to build a car from the ground up if we needed to. A spare tub, we've got every piece of bodywork we would need to build a car from scratch, basically. So that's a big part of it, is making sure that everything's in there and everything's ready to go, so that if you have any big incident, that you've got what you need to get back out on track for another session or for the race.
Well, when we get to the track, obviously IMSA parks us in an order, and everybody goes in and gets parked, and once everybody's parked, then IMSA gives us the green light and says, okay, everybody can open the trailers now, and the doors come down and equipment comes out. We have a crew out in pit lane setting up the tent and setting up timing stand and fuel rig, and then we've got a crew back at the trailer that's setting up the awning and getting all the tools and walling and all that set up under the tent. Then the car will come out, and typically the car goes right to safety inspection right away, right off the truck, and goes through its mandatory safety inspection before every race and before you get on track. Then the car will come back to the tent, and we'll put it back on the setup pad and just reaffirm that everything that was set up in the shop hasn't changed or moved at all in the travel time or riding around in the trailer.
Once setup day is done, a lot of it's, we have specific things you want to test in the practice sessions. You figure out kind of where you're at relative to everyone else, see what the drivers like or don't like about the car, how's the track conditions, how does that affect what we need to change with the car. A lot of it's just seeing how we can get the car to drive a little better and hopefully be a little faster.
Typically you go there with a plan, and usually from practice 1 on it starts to change. It's just like a strategy for the race. You got a strategy for how you're going to start the race and how you ideally run the whole race, but it typically changes with the first yellow.
The time leading up to the race, it's something that I don't think anyone really understands. It's almost impossible to contemplate exactly how you feel. You spent months preparing for this one event. You watch the car leave the grid and it all just goes away. And the first thing that goes through your head is, wow, did I tighten this little bolt, or did somebody do this to the car, or did we do this, or is that right? And you are no longer in control of that. And then the race starts, and then it's, you always got to be ready because you never know what's going to happen.
I'm the most relaxed when we go green, because that's when it's time to go racing, and that's probably where I'm the most comfortable and the most relaxed, because I know at that point now, it's up to us to execute the race, and that's something I have a lot of confidence in. I got a lot of confidence in the drivers, a lot of confidence in the team, and so then it's just a matter of how do we execute the race and make the best decisions we can throughout the race.